Think about this for a second. What if you could get a ticket to a high-paying tech career with zero upfront cost? Sounds almost too good to be true, right? Well, for thousands of students, a coding bootcamp called BloomTech, which you might remember as Lambda School, offered exactly that. But, as we're about to find out, this supposedly risk-free promise came with some very real, very hidden costs.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the incredible promise BloomTech was selling. Then, we'll dive into the pretty shocking reality that investigators uncovered. We'll see how the official consumer watchdog got involved, what penalties they brought down, and finally, what all of this means for you and your rights.
So, let's start with the sales pitch. BloomTech's entire model was built around this really simple, incredibly tempting idea. Get your education now, and don't pay a dime until you've landed a great job.
And this was their mantra, their big hook. It's brilliant marketing because it makes it sound like you're in a partnership. The school is investing in you, and they only succeed if you succeed. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, a lot.
The secret sauce behind this whole thing was something called an income share agreement, or an ISA. The deal was you'd pay BloomTech 17% of your pre-tax income for a couple of years, but, and this is the key part, only after you started making at least $50,000 a year. On paper, it looked like the perfect risk-free opportunity.
Yeah, so, that amazing promise? It didn't take long for it to start falling apart. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that's the CFPB, started digging around, and what they found painted a very different picture.
To get people to sign up, BloomTech was throwing around some massive numbers for their job placement rates. We're talking as high as 86%. If you're looking to make a career change, a number like that is basically a green light.
But here's the kicker. The CFPB found that the company's own internal data showed the real numbers were way, way lower. More like 50%, and for some groups of students, it was as low as 30%. That's not just a small exaggeration. That's a completely different story.
And the deception went so much deeper than just job stats. BloomTech swore up and down that their ISA was not a loan. Turns out, legally, it absolutely was. They said there was no finance charge, but the CFPB calculated the average cost of the credit was around $4,000. And risk-free? Not even close. If you missed a single payment, you could default, and the entire $30,000 had to be paid back immediately.
So, when the CFPB put it all together, they basically nailed them on four main things. They hid what the debt actually was, they lied about job placements, they weren't honest about selling off these agreements to investors, and they used illegal clauses in their contracts.
Now, this last part is super important and kind of sneaky. BloomTech broke something called the holder rule. By leaving this protection out of their contracts, they made it so that when they sold your loan to a third-party investor, you couldn't use the school's lies as a defense if that new company came to collect. It essentially stripped students of one of their most basic legal protections.
While all of this shady stuff eventually got the attention of the big guns, a federal agency that was literally created to stop this exact kind of thing.
So who is the CFPB? You can think of them as the top cop for consumer finance. They're the ones who enforce federal laws and have the power to go after companies that are ripping people off.
And the director of the CFPB, Rohit Chopra, he did not mince words. He came right out and said that BloomTech and its CEO were pushing these loans as risk-free, when they knew perfectly well they came with serious costs and risks. So this investigation wasn't just for show. It led to an official order from the government, with some very real, very serious consequences for both BloomTech and its CEO. The order they handed down was a total takedown of their business model. They banned BloomTech from any kind of lending, period. They forced them to stop collecting money from certain grads, gave current students an escape hatch, and, of course, hit them with fines.
Check this out. They didn't just fine the company. They went after the CEO, Austin Allred, personally. He had to pay $100,000, and the company had to pay over $64,000, and all that money goes straight into a relief fund for victims of this kind of fraud.
And these weren't just slaps on the wrists. We're talking long-term consequences here. The CEO is banned from any student lending for a full decade. But the company, BloomTech, they are banned from all consumer lending forever. Okay, so that's the story of one company. But what does any of this really mean for the rest of us? Well, this whole case is a huge reminder of the laws that are already in place to protect every single one of us. Let's get specific. It really boils down to this. What are your fundamental rights when you take out a loan? Because there's a specific law that BloomTech broke that you should definitely know about.
It's called the Truth in Lending Act, or TILA for short, and its entire purpose is super simple: to force lenders to be honest and upfront with you about the real cost of borrowing money. No more hiding the ball.
Under this law, a lender has to tell you 3 critical things: exactly how much money you're financing, what the total cost of borrowing that money will be in a clear dollar amount, and the APR. These are the key facts BloomTech hid, and that's what made it illegal.
And this is probably the biggest lesson from the whole saga. It doesn't matter what fancy new name a company comes up with. You can call it an income share agreement or whatever you want. If it looks like a loan and acts like a loan, it is a loan, and it has to follow the law. The substance is what matters, not the marketing spin.
So the whole BloomTech story really leaves us with this one powerful question. In a world that's all about disruption and financial innovation, where do we draw the line? When does a new business model stop being innovative and start being just old-fashioned deception? It's something we all need to keep our eyes on.